All right, so I'll do a little introduction. Hello again, everyone. I am Cece Cherico. I am a senior neuroscience student at the University of South Carolina, and I'm in the Honors College. So this is part of my uh, Honors College thesis, and this is my second interview about forgiveness. So, um, hello, friends. So just give a little like background about yourself. Who you are, your age, where you come from, religion, are you a positive or negative person, those kinds of things. So,
Okay.
whatever you
So,
want to include.
okay. My name is Fran Wardell. I'm 67 years old. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, lived there for 52 years, raised my family there, and then moved to Montgomery County, Upper Gwinnett. Well, first it was Montgomeryville. I lived there for about 10 years. Um, my daughter lived with me there at my mother's. It was my mother's house that we moved to from Philadelphia. And my daughter came with me for a short period of the time. My background is that I am an uh, Irish Catholic. My heritage is actually Irish and German.
Oh, very
And
nice.
yeah, and I grew up in the Kensington section of the city.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you're familiar with that. It looked a lot different when I was growing up than it does now. But then I raised my family in Northeast Philadelphia in the Castor Garden section. So that's around Common and Bustleton. If that gives you, if you need to know those dynamics, because the city streets, the city neighborhoods are actually distinct little villages in themselves and have their own cultural um, ticks.
Hmm.
But I would think for the most part that I'm a positive person. Um, and is there anything else you would care to know?
No, I don't. I think that's all good. You hit everything.
Okay.
All right. So now that we have kind of like your background and like where you come from and your context, so my first question for you is, so forgiveness is like a very big, it's like that's what my thesis is about. And so I'm kind of like exploring um the background about it and like what it is and then how to approach it and then also like looking at it in a Catholic viewpoint at the end. But how would you define forgiveness? Like it can be kind of a broad idea, but
Right. And I do come up from a Catholic background, but I would define forgiveness as the absence of anger
mm,
and the absence of fear. Um, and those are, I guess, the two words that I would use because without those, um, you can't really have forgiveness.
hmm.
Because if you're not forgiving someone, you're still a little angry, you know. And if you're fear, I don't know that your forgiveness is complete
Hmm.
if you still have fear. But that's I think a little complex because then I think you get into is forgiveness without fear, is that really realistic? Should there be a certain element of fear, as it pertains to self-protection?
Hmm.
So maybe I'm not using the right word, but I haven't really thought that deeply about it. But as far as fear, I think that we can get into that a little bit later, probably, and explore that a little bit more, if
Sounds
you would
good.
like.
Yeah. I would say definitely the anger thing like really strikes a chord. I feel like that is one of the biggest things that I was kind of coming up across. And I like the addition of fear too. But anger is definitely one of the things where sometimes forgiveness just seems to like let go of the anger. And just kind of like release that. Because like obviously like in response to like a bad thing that happens, there is like a just anger. There's like, okay, yes, that's like makes sense, like there's something that's unfair about this and like the anger arises naturally. Um and yeah, I think the problem is that oftentimes people hold on to that anger for too long, then it becomes a grudge, right? And so yeah, that seemed really interesting.
Mhm.
Anyway, so how do you think like what in your life has kind of like fed that definition for you? Like was it something that you were taught? Was it something that you've kind of like stumbled on yourself? Um,
Um, I mean, I definitely think that it was something that I was taught through my religious background. I think at certain points in my life, it was um, harder to um, acknowledge or express that teaching. And I had like a bit of a change, like I fell away from the Catholic Church for a long time, probably in my late teens, early 20s, and actually married a Jewish man.
Hmm.
So there's a difference in thought in the Jewish tradition as well.
Yeah.
But um, um, I'm sorry, I got
Oh, no, you're good. Take your time.
misdirect. But then I returned to the Catholic Church probably in the year 2000. So now I'm gonna have to do the math to think how much. I guess I'm 50, or am I just turned 50, or and probably late 40s, early 50s. But it was the year 2000 because I remember it was the millennial year. So just leading up to that, probably in September
Mhm.
before 2000, I went back to the Catholic Church. And boy, I learned a lot. Because I'd been away for so long, they asked me to go through the RCIA, and I did.
Mhm.
And I really got acclimated in so many things that I had forgotten. Um, so, and then from there, I've continually been able to, attend Bible studies. For 10 years, I was at Resurrection of Our Lord in Northeast Philadelphia. And then probably the last 15 years, I've been at St. Stanislaus in Montgomery County. Now, I will tell you, there's a giant difference between the city and the suburbs. So it's Democrat versus Republican.
Hmm.
So a lifelong Democrat, it's very hard here in Montgomery County.
Yeah, I
I
can
watch what I
imagine.
say and who I say it to.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay,
Hmm. Yeah, I know. It's always like interesting to see the differences, like just a few miles down the road could be
right,
a 40-minute drive, I guess.
right. It's true.
All right. So kind of now we talked about how you forget how you understand forgiveness, and then how do you think the people around you or like other people in general perceive forgiveness? And there can definitely be like differences in beliefs, so too. It's like whatever you've been kind of noticing.
Hmm. Um, so I mean, I'd look at different people. Like I'd look at the church group that I'm with now. I look at actually, you're familiar with community liberation. I've
Hmm.
learned an extraordinary amount of um, kind of a perspective of looking at the faith, which has really been so beneficial to me, probably for the last 8 years. Um, so I have that group, and I'll call that the Montgomery County group because they're very similar to my church group, although they're very different in um, their acceptance of things. Um, So that's a very community liberation is a much more welcoming community than say my parish church, which I love my parish church and a lot of people in it, but it's very different from my experience in community liberation. So they both have Catholic inputs, but um, and then I'll go to my family group, and in my family, there's like my mother. Who is going to be 90. She's 89 now. She'll be 90 in February. She looks at forgiveness like, oh, my brother, I don't know if you know, but I have a brother who was murdered at 27 years old. So he was my youngest brother. He was 12 years old. And, my mother's like, oh, I forgive them. There were two people who killed him, a man and a woman. And, my mother said, oh, I forgive them. Oh, and to me and my sisters, we're just like floored. It's not like we don't want to forgive them, but we have a hard time forgetting the pain that was caused because there was a 3-month period of time that we recognized that he was missing and before his body was found. And we didn't know if he was dead or alive. I mean, I was in the search, um, thinking that, maybe he needs us. My brother, again, was 12 years, he was born when I was um, 12 years old. So he was like kind of a different generation, but he was also like the apple of our eye. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? He was our hope.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just and this is not an experience that I wanted to talk about, but it's the giant thing. It would be like
Hmm.
the elephant in the room if I didn't talk about it and talk about forgiveness.
Hmm.
I'd be missing a major point.
Hmm.
But so my mother is like, oh yes, I forgive them. I forget right from the get-go. I remember even after one of the trials of the man, my sister my older sister saying to the boy's father, oh, I know Peter would forgive Jesse. And I remember standing back, I'm like, really? How do you know that? I mean, I just lost my brother had, because he was so young, he was the apple of our eye. He had this smile that whenever he would smile, it would just fill my heart, like I was just so grateful that he
Hmm.
was smiling, and we would do anything during his life to make sure that he was happy,
Hmm.
you know. But at any rate, I might have digressed a bit.
No, no, it's okay. We're
Okay.
just taking it wherever it goes. So, but yeah, so for like your mom, it was just like it was much more simple. But for you and your sisters, it just like obviously there was still a lot of pain behind
Right.
it, and you don't
Mm.
want to forget it. So, like, do you
Well,
think? Yeah.
I think that just recently, after I guess it's 27 years now, both of them were sentenced to a life in prison. Um, the woman was just actually released from prison, and there was a parole hearing. So now this is like 26 years later, I guess, at the time. And my sisters and I just had the most difficult time. I mean, just mentally, we all went to this place where we couldn't function,
Hmm.
So, um, you need to reach out to people then that can assist you. And because you feel very vulnerable, you're very careful to
Hmm.
who you reach out to. Um, because really, for that period of 26 years, I could never talk about it.
Hmm.
Different from my sisters who, whenever they started talking about it, I would kind of leave the room. I didn't make a big deal about it. I just didn't want to be part. I didn't want
Hmm.
to participate in anything because I just didn't want to hear everybody's perspective. And I have a large Irish Catholic family. I have 26 cousins and their children and their spouses. So it's this huge family, and everybody is so um, forthcoming with their unsolicited comments,
Hmm.
and so so I would just kind of like leave, like, leave the room, make an excuse to, oh, I've got to go home, I got to do this. I never really participated, but when that parole hearing came up, we did. We all went, the three of us, my brother, my younger brother, there was five of us. So Peter, the one that was murdered, is the youngest, and then my brother Bob. He did not. He had just come back to the United States. He worked abroad for many, many years. And so he had just come back to the United States and, was just settling in a new job. And he just didn't feel um, that he could do it at the time, come to the parole hearing. So me and my sister did. My sisters have much more anger than I do, and neither one of them practices the faith.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But I mean, I was angry too.
Hmm.
And I think I was able to at least rationalize, like, they were like, oh, she shouldn't be released. I'm like, well, I don't think she should be released either. But you know what? If they're having this parole hearing after 26 years, and then we found out that the governor had pardoned her, so from a life sentence without parole to a parole hearing. I mean, it was just reasonable that no matter what we say or do, she's going to be released.
Hmm.
So you get to do a victim impact statement. So, I just tried to be as logical. I tried to just focus on what my brother meant to me, how his loss impacted me,
Hmm.
um, and just that I really uh, appreciated everything that the Louisiana, state did at the time that it happened and in the search for him. But I really felt that they were in error if
Hmm.
they were to release her. And that's kind of all I had. Where like my older sister, kind of really, still had a lot of anger. And my younger sister, she was just, in this state of confusion. And, so I decided at that time, they wanted us to, um, be on record for the man's prison records in case we had to be notified and for her record. And I said, I'm done. I don't want to have anything to do with this for the rest of my life because I felt like and I had discussed this with the priests in my parish, sought counsel from them. I've spoken to it in meetings, um, with religious people. And, I spent a lot of time in adoration, seeking answers, or seeking, what is God asking me in this situation? And so I just arrived at the decision, like, because I think the Catholic thought is you forgive. Like I remember, I don't know if you recall, in Lancaster, there was a shooting in a Quaker um,
I think I
Quaker
did
area
hear
where
about this.
children, yeah, children were murdered by
Hmm.
this man who is mentally ill. And the Quaker community, I don't know if it was Quaker or Amish, the Amish community. And they, took in the wife of this murderer and, you know, expressed their forgiveness. And the wife was very, remorseful of what her husband did. So it was all beautiful. I mean, uh, but yet to me, and I've even been um, at the New York Encounter when, people have spoken to this, and I think it's lovely that they can speak to it and have found some resolution. But I think each case is different.
Hmm.
And in this particular case, and in my experience, it's something that I feel like one person had told me, you need to go to her, let her know that she's forgiven. This is your opportunity to bring somebody closer to God, and I'm like, that's that doesn't make sense to me.
Hmm.
That I'm still miss my brother, still feel like I was really cheated, have spent hours in adoration asking for God's guidance, have sought guidance from religious leaders, and you know, the push in my faith is to forgive. So in my heart, I have forgiven this person, but God forbid she should live next door to me. That's a little further
Yeah.
than my heart is able to forgive.
Hmm.
So um, and sometimes I think like in the church, the people have a sense of, oh, well, we'll apply this teaching to you and this teaching to you, and then, we'll get you there. We'll get you healed. You're never going to heal me. I miss my brother. He was taken from me unjustly. Yeah,
Hmm.
there's nothing that you can do to make me feel better. I'm
Hmm.
sorry. Does that explain it a little bit?
Yeah, that perfectly explains it.
Okay.
Yeah. And like, yeah, at the end of the day, like what's happened is like a crime and like a horrible, horrible act and a horrible sin. And like, yeah, there's nothing, it's not gonna go back to the way it was, and it's not gonna like magically disappear, like all the pain and the suffering that comes from it. And yeah, sometimes people like can kind of get stuck in certain like beliefs that they have about like what forgiveness should be. And so sometimes it ends up like just kind of like pushing on to somebody else, even though this it doesn't apply in the situation. Um, but like I think the main focus is like, yes, the goal is to forgive, and like it might take a long time, and as long as you feel that you've forgiven the person, like you don't have to be friendly or like go out of your way, because like what's happened to you and like the woman and the man, like that's like a big evil act. And so like you don't need to be friendly. There's nothing that you need to do for them. What matters is you. Um, yeah, and I think that a lot of people lose sight of what like forgiveness should actually be. It doesn't need to be a fixing of the relationship. It doesn't need to be like perfect, happy, and bliss. But like
Mhm.
what's happened is like an evil, and it you just don't want it to like weigh as heavily on your heart as it did when it first happened, and like the pain that happened when it first happened. So I think, yeah, like that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I'm like sorry that's been kind of frustrating because I know that like obviously it's a big process to undertake and just like a big thing to kind of even approach. And yeah, can feel a little bit confusing along the way when you hear a lot of different people's voices. Hmm. Yeah.
That
So.
was the biggie. Yeah. Sorry, I led with that. I guess I wanted to get it out of the way.
Hmm.
If I tried to not bring it up, it would just get in the way.
Hmm.
Um, Small things are, I guess, obviously easier to forgive
Hmm.
because there's so many bigger issues
Yeah.
uh, that you have going on. But I'm sorry, I'll let you lead.
Oh, no, no,
I was
no.
looking at
Please
your
continue
I,
on.
I was looking at the questions that you gave me.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, the closest people to you are your family.
Hmm.
And I have a large family. Um, but my mother and father, was just talking to my sister the other day, and he's like, geez, they're so frustrating. You know, a lot of people have the feeling, but my father was mentally ill. He was a schizophrenic, paranoid schizophrenic. So, it was really challenging, especially in the teenage years, and my mom, and that was like back in the 70s when I was a teenager, mental illness was not talked about. Oh God, I pray to have an alcoholic father. Everybody had an alcoholic father, but not everybody had a father who is paranoid schizophrenic. And so, um, it wasn't very well understood. And, my mother's reaction to it, you know, um, it's kind of like hard to forgive the times that, you tried to make things better and then were blocked. you know,
Hmm.
and stuff like so those things play over and over and over and over again in family relationships. And my mother, like I said, she's 89, she's going on 90. And for the past 2 years, actually, she seems to be slipping a little mentally. And
Hmm.
it's like a progression. It's not something that's clearly visible one day. It goes on. And so we were talking, and I was like, she's like, I don't know why mommy's so frustrating. I'm like, most people go through this at the end of their parents' lives. For us, it was like an entire lifetime that we had to take care of our parents. You
Hmm.
know, like my dad stopped working, I guess when he was probably around the time that my youngest brother was born. But then my mom, you know, after a long time, finally left my dad, and we went, I was living away from home with a friend's family. And so the three younger siblings were still there. My sister had already married. And I mean, we had to keep going back to the family. Like we couldn't live our lives. We had to keep going back and helping, my mother get through this. And then so my mother couldn't see my father. So we had to take care of my father. Yeah, and it wasn't like he would take care of himself. He would just sit there catatonically,
Hmm.
not do anything. So there's resentment, throughout different periods of life. But like towards the end of my father's life, I was finally able to move him, and like maybe the last 5 years, get him out of the neighborhood where we grew up, because, it was a drug infested neighborhood. Nothing
Hmm.
good was going to happen there. And because of his nature, he was kind of, I was always afraid that like he would cause trouble and then be, you know, punished for that trouble. But anyway, so I always had to keep an eye on him, and um so there's this resentment towards my mother. and my father. But the thing of it is with the family, there's needs that you have to meet because
Hmm.
you are part of a family unit. And so you have to forgive those times that they weren't there for you because they couldn't be there for you, but
Hmm.
yet you still had an obligation to care for them because of your faith, and because of the way that we raised, like the family unit is important. So
Hmm.
you can't just abandon that family unit because you don't like the way they're behaving. You
Hmm.
have to strive to make it better for them and at the same time protect yourself.
Hmm.
So but there comes a time, especially like at the end of my father's life, where I had to, really protect him, make sure, and by protecting it, make sure he had a roof over his head, make sure he had food to eat, make sure I visited him, and there was nobody around him that
Hmm.
was harmful to him, or nobody around him that he would be harmful to. So, so I mean, it was a lot of work and it took a lot of forgiveness to be
Hmm.
able to do that. But I think with the help of God, I was able to do that beautifully to the extent that when he died, um, I was so grateful for that time that I had spent with him or that I
Hmm.
was able to devote to him. Whereas prior to his death, I was, you know, I gotta go see grandpa. How to get my
Hmm.
kids involved. My son would want the car. Well, only if you take grandpa to the supermarket,
Hmm.
just, stuff like that. So, I don't know. Did I veer off there or am I still
No,
on
that
the?
makes sense. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, there's kind of like a lifetime of like building up things, and it just makes sense. Yeah, like it's hard in the moment to like always like, okay, I'm gonna forgive this person like for
Right,
not being there for me. Like, right?
right.
Yeah, you're a part of a family unit. Like you've obligations and like duties to uphold, and yeah, it's not always gonna be perfect, and it's gonna be hard. No, that makes perfect sense. Do you think that like you're like if you didn't have your faith, that it would have been really hard to forgive your dad?
I think if I didn't have my faith, I probably would never have had anything to do with my family.
Hmm.
From an early age, I was taken in by a friend's family,
Yeah.
and they were very good to me until I went back and helped my mother when
Hmm.
she left my dad, you know.
Hmm.
So I probably, without my faith, I would have probably never had anything to do with them. I think, but it's hard to say because it was always a
Yeah.
part of me. So it's just surmising. I
Hmm.
don't know how people live without faith, but there are a lot of people who do
Hmm.
and do it successfully and um, still have a commitment to family.
Hmm.
So, you know, but that's for me what
Yeah.
always moved or drove
Hmm.
me.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful thing. Like that's very impressive to say that like loyal to your family, even though there's so many hard circumstances. Like I know in my family, I feel like half my siblings are gonna like forget about me. So
No, I don't
and
think
we're
they
definitely
will.
not as dramatic. So
They adore you. You have the loveliest family I've ever met, really.
thank you, thank you.
Uh, From the
Lots
first
of
time
lots of
I spent one Christmas Eve with your family, and I just said, I went home and said, "This is the loveliest family you would ever." Each one is unique and just special in their own way, and your parents are just delightful.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it. We love you, Fran. Um, and then I'll think I just end with maybe like one other question. So, um, do you think like you've had like big experiences with forgiveness and like big moments you've had to kind of wrestle with it? Do you think that there are things that like cannot be forgiven?
No, I mean, I don't. I think like even like just being an American, we see times that uh, the country has behaved badly.
Hmm.
Um, and we've sought forgiveness and certain populations are accepting of that forgiveness and others are not. Certain people within the different groups. Um, but no, I believe um I don't know, that's not necessarily true. I think deliberate acts of evil, you know, with a specific intent. Like I'll look at 9/11.
Hmm.
That was a specific evil intent to destroy a people who did nothing wrong. You just didn't like us,
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's things that are uh forgivable. Um, but we're not. I don't feel either that we are able to judge whether something is forgivable or not. Like even in my situation with my brother, um, I don't have anything to do with it. I put it in God's hands. If you want to forgive them, you forgive them. I'll go, I'll follow your lead. You know,
Hmm.
it is how I feel about it. But even my parents, like, look, we all answer to God in the end, or I believe we do. So let me not waste my time on earth deciding whether I should forgive or I shouldn't. Probably when in doubt, go ahead and forgive,
Hmm.
because why carry things around with you? That's how like all these wars. I know some people that don't practice the faith have always said, I don't want anything to do with religion. It's a cause of all the wars. And it's not. A lot of people use religion as an excuse to go to war.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's necessarily the root.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I have for you today.
Well,
But
I thank you for your time.
no, thank you for your time. I appreciate it a lot.
Thanks
Um,
for making me talk about things I don't talk about.
I I hope it wasn't too much. I promise I didn't go into that with any expectations.
No,
So
no. It was a pleasure seeing you. I really wish you well and am very glad you're in your senior year and finishing up.
thank you. I know. I can't wait to see everyone back at home. It'll be very exciting. And good to see you face to face, not just on Zoom. So
Well,
yeah.
God bless you. Take good care of yourself, Cece.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You